introduction of who I am. That's me, back in the early days in school. A joyful time for me. I loved school, and at that age, all I ever wanted to do was be a teacher. But of course, I had absolutely no idea the journey that was lying ahead of me and how unbelievably challenging this job is. So, to give you a brief background, I'm originally Irish. I'm from Northern Ireland, and that's where I trained with my Bachelor of Education, my teacher training. And then I continued my education in Finland, which is where I got to know Alexandra and Dimitra, and Jukka, of course. And the Finnish bug bit me. So, like almost everyone who's been there, it inspired me. But that's also where I met my now husband, who is not Finnish, he's Swiss. So that's a very short story of, if we fast forward many, many years later, I now find myself in Switzerland, and that's where I'm teaching now as a second grade teacher. And I'm also now the co-founder of a non-profit called Embrace Joy in Education, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But first, I'd like to concentrate on the teaching, because this is how I imagine myself as a teacher. And this is how I feel as a teacher many days of the week. And I'm sure it's a feeling that many of you can identify with. And I would just like to share with you some practical things that I do in the classroom that make those days especially a little bit easier. So, why we should teach with joy. So, I came across a really interesting article called The Neuroscience of Joyful Education that kind of proves why it's important in our field. And it gives a really good background of information in terms of what the research says. So the research does suggest that superior learning takes place when classroom experiences are enjoyable and relevant to students' lives, interests, and experiences. So of course, like we all know, we need to know a little bit about our students to make things relevant to them. And not only should it be enjoyable for students, it should be enjoyable for us. If we are enjoying what we do, then it automatically rubs off on what we're doing in the classroom. So how do we do that? Well, the examples I want to share with you are not necessarily the ones that I thought were the best ideas, but they were actually the things that my students told me that I should tell you today. So the whole idea I came here with was teaching with joy, but not only that, it's teaching more with joy. Because when we put more into the job with energy, with enthusiasm, with joy, then we get more from it and the students get more from it. So there's a gap in between the teach with joy. This is what I mean by teach more with joy. That more has a big meaning here. And to me it means maximizing opportunities for relationships and enjoyment. So fostering those relationships with the children and enjoying what we are doing and trying to find ways that the children will enjoy being there as well and engaging with what they're learning. And the ideas that I want to share with you today are quite practical ones that I hope if you haven't tried them before or you've seen them and thought about them, then maybe now you might give them a go, or you realize I'm doing that too. That means you could also be up here speaking as well. These in the heart here are the answers that my students gave me when I asked them, what are the things that you've loved the most about being in second grade? What do you enjoy the most? And the answers that they gave me, I want to share with you today. So let's start with how a typical morning in my classroom looks. Many of you maybe have this already, or you've seen it online. I check in every morning with each and every child. And this is what it looks like. In my opinion, it's much more than just an online trend. There is a real solid reason for this, and there's research behind it that suggests that it's worth doing. So this is what sits right next to my desk, because quite often the students don't all arrive at the same time in the morning. So I have this waiting for them, that they choose to come up and greet me in the morning, and they make a choice of how they want to do that. So I have 4 options for them. There could be more, there could be less. It's absolutely adaptable. And they make a choice of how they want to say good morning. This really helps build a relationship with each student. I acknowledge each child at the beginning of every single day. And we have quite long days in the school I teach in, so I try to do this twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And the afternoon is almost always the time where I can see if a problem has arisen during the day or during the break time, whenever they've been outside and they come back in and we are wanting to settle again in the classroom. That gives me the opportunity to see if there's something that needs to be addressed before we dive into a lesson. And then it's what you can consider here, what I mean by a proactive behavior and engagement strategy, because I'm already dealing with a problem before it escalates. And I've already built some sort of a rapport with each child, just even by acknowledging them by name every single day, just to check in with them and to see how they're doing on that particular day. I think the opportunity to provide the children with this element of choice really matters. And usually we get to the stage where whenever we've developed this morning routine, then I can offer even more ownership of it. So then I offer the children the chance to come up with their own morning greetings. And they really have original ideas, if I can remember every single child's idea. But it's also a challenge that they see that, okay, I'm only human. Sometimes I forget what their greeting is. Then they need to remind me. And of course, it takes repetition. So they see, for me, it also takes practice to get to the level of mastery that I am the example for them as well. So I've had children come in with their morning greeting, and it's a very elaborate clapping sequence. Okay, I'll give that a go. I've had some who've come with their role model inspirations, and they're saying to me, okay, good morning. That's how I reflect them, good morning, with the name, of course, to acknowledge them individually. And that provides this whole extra level of ownership and builds that relationship with them. The next thing I want to share with you is an everyday thing. It threads through every single lesson, every single interaction that we have in the classroom is through a message of kindness. And this helps to give us as a class, a collective class project. All the children remember it fondly from the whole year. It helps to foster good relations in the classroom, a classroom community, and basically what happens is every day they're encouraged to engage in intentional acts of kindness. So they intentionally see that somebody is having a problem, or they've lost their pencil or their rubber, and they offer one. They are intentional in their actions, and they take the initiative to see that I can help someone and I'm going to do that. And so for me as a teacher, I get much less of the tattletales during the day. So I don't get as much of a little Tim coming up to me and saying, Sophie stole my pencil, and like, you know, those little moaning minis that come up to you during the day and complain about little things and might drive you a little bit crazy. So those tend to fall by the wayside, and instead I get children coming up to me going, Tim was really kind to me, he lent me his pencil for the day. And then I have a little moment of triumph. Yes, he can add a kindness leaf to our kindness tree. And it's less about the child themselves coming up and proclaiming, I was very kind, I did this. It's not so much about that. It's more about the others recognizing that someone was kind to them. And then they acknowledge that person. And so that is what allows them to put a kindness leaf on the kindness tree. And so it is also a sense of achievement when they see that the tree is absolutely bare at the beginning of the year. There's nothing on it, and it does tend to take weeks before it starts to bloom. But by the end of the year, it's full, and sometimes we might even need to extend the branches beyond the door. The next thing that I'd like to talk to you about is an answer that I was surprised that the children gave me. In the school I work in, the subject areas are quite well defined. They are not necessarily as overlapping as we might hope them to be at this stage. There's a shift in Switzerland at the moment to competence-based learning, but it's taking some time. And so in the classroom, it's possible already to make this shift. So the children's answers of the subject areas that they enjoyed the most popular answer I got was art in maths. And so when we combine a subject like maths that sometimes the children just associate with number and logical thinking, and they don't associate it with a sense of creativity, then we can open that up to them to make them realize that it's all interconnected. There are ways to think outside of the box here. So I have two examples for you of how I've had this cross-curricular learning and creative approach with the children. And one is when we were learning about 2D shapes, and we combined that with optical illusions. And so they created their own optical illusions using 2D shapes, and then it opened up a whole new discussion about why they chose that particular shape, how if they can describe that shape within the optical illusions, if they can identify the different shapes that other people have put in their illusions, and that the discussions that were opened up from that gave way for that level of learning that I was hoping that they would take away from the maths. And on the other side, we have a theme, a superhero theme. It's always very popular with second graders, and it's very diverse. It can be used with anything. They can be spelling superheroes, they can be subtraction superheroes, they can be superheroes even just as they are, just recognizing their own strengths. And so this was one example when they made superhero cities, and each city had to have a number of buildings, and each building had to have a number of windows. And the number of windows had to be calculated with a times table. They had to arrange the windows in an array. So the top row might have 2 windows, and down the side there might be 4 windows. So then it would have 2 times 4, so that building would have 8 windows. And there were many ways that we could then differentiate this activity so that they could make it more challenging. They could challenge their peers, get them to identify the times table, how many windows they have on each building, or kind of make it adaptable for the children to have the certain number of buildings that would be available for them to be able to do. So this is the subject area of maths. The next thing I want to show you is more to do with literacy, with the language base, because there are often children in the class who are reluctant readers or reluctant writers, which I tried to come up with a couple of ways to help them to enjoy that area of learning a little bit more. And one of them was also an example that was brought up yesterday. I think it can be adapted to many age levels. And we have a class pet. His name is Sean the Sheep. Sean the Sheep comes all the way from Ireland. He's introduced to the children at the beginning of the year. Sean the Sheep is very shy, so it takes some time for him to get to know the class. They need to be very calm around Sean the Sheep, and they have the privilege of taking Sean the Sheep home for a weekend. And while they have Sean the Sheep at home, they can take pictures, they can draw what they did with Sean the Sheep, and they can write something in his journal. And so he's had a lot of adventures, and he's needed to go in the washing machine a couple of times since I started this. But it's really fostered independent writing with the children. And that and along with me being an example for them in terms of reading, I become their reading role model by reading to them a class novel, which is not a new idea, but it's an idea that sometimes and doesn't have much revival, even though it has a lot of value. So every year I choose 2 novels to read to the children, usually Roald Dahl novels. At the moment we are reading James and the Giant Peach. And at the end of every day, or at the end of a language lesson, I take that last 5 or 10 minutes to sit everyone down and get comfortable and read a couple of chapters from the novel. And it's me who's doing the reading, so they get a sense of me coming alive in a different way and having a different sort of side to my personality, and for them to also access a text that is beyond their current reading level. That for them is a memorable experience, and they definitely see you then as an example and as a role model, and they feel like they're empowered to read more and to enjoy what they're reading, because they see that I'm enjoying what I'm reading. So, the last thing that I wanted to share with you about teaching more with joy is movement. I try to get the children to move around the room as much as possible. I stick things up on the walls around the room to get them to find the sentences or the words or the maths problems. Instead of having it on a page in front of them, they've got to move a little bit. This is an example from phonics.
Hop, hop, where shall I stop?
It's hop, 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 where shall I stop? So they hop along the signs and they stop on whatever one that's the end of saying hop, 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 where shall I stop? And they have identified that sound, and then they work with that and see if they can find words with that sound. And of course this helps to boost brain power if we get them moving, and brain breaks are also a thing I like to use quite a lot. I don't have a smart board or a screen in the classroom, so I try to think of different easy, quick ways to get children moving again, even if it's just a really quick and snappy thing. And I'm going to ask you now to indulge me and engage in a brain break with me, because I already feel like you've been sitting for a really long time. So let's stand up.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1,
How many times?
4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 1.
And that's how I got to this point. So I don't feel like I'm a superhero teacher every day. There's definitely not a job title with that. So I am a teacher, like many of you in the room. But inspired by FIEdu last year, Dimitra and I came up with the idea, as we were sitting in the audience there, to start something a bit more. So we came up with this idea of MJoy, Embrace Joy in Education, to give ourselves a boost and to also help other teachers in the same way. And so we started a non-profit. So I'm just going to briefly share with you how that started. While I'm doing that, you can think of very quick questions you might want to ask, but I'm running out of time. So this is how it was born. This was FIEdu last year. I'm going to blame Alexandra and Yuka in particular for getting us to this point, because it has led to a magnificent journey that we have been on this past year, organizing events for teachers to bring teachers together, to inspire each other, like you have been doing through FIEdu. And so we thought we could bring it back with us where we are. So I'm in Switzerland, and Dimitra is Greek, but she lives in Finland. And there's a need for these types of things even in those places as well. So what you're doing here is reaching further afield, even further than you might imagine. So that's why I think it's important to share with you how this has inspired us. So much so that we have a sister conference happening next month in Athens called the Joyful Festival of Education. So if you're interested in coming to the Joyful Festival of Education, Please don't hesitate to come and approach Dimitra and I. We are here all day today. This was the original goal that we had, to give teachers the opportunity to exchange ideas, collaborate, and inspire them to embrace joy in education no matter where they teach. Romania, Switzerland, Finland, all of us actually can take inspiration from each other and find ways to bring joy into our everyday lives. This is what I want to leave you with. This is the Joyful Festival of Education that we are organizing in Athens next month. So if you feel like you can join us, please do. We have some really interesting, inspiring and interactive workshops happening there. Some of the topics are up there. But that's where I must finish. So, and unless you have any questions, I would like to say thank you so much for having me, and thank you for listening.